There's a beautiful memorial at the top of the rocky road to 148 American servicemen who died here during World War II. They were buried in a cemetery at Lisnabreeny. But what was the role of the American forces in Northern Ireland? Ernie Crummy explains.
The American forces in Northern Ireland during the Second World War comprised, of course, army units as such, ground army units, but there were also tens of thousands of United States Army airmen and indeed airwomen here during the Second World War. And they were here for two reasons, basically. Number one was a logistical reason, largely connected with the air depot at Langford Lodge. It was a huge logistical facility of the 8th Air Force, where again thousands of aircraft passed through there, being modified and serviced and maintained for use by the Americans in the European theatre of operations. The other aspect of things here was training. Northern Ireland was a very important centre for the training of American bomber crews, both medium bomber crews and heavy bomber crews.
But there was one local Castlereagh man who was serving with the US Army. Teddy Dixon explained why he joined the American forces and started a journey that would take him through southern France and Germany to the gates of the concentration camp at Dachau.
Well, I was born in America in 1920. In 1911, my father went out from here to America. My mother went out in 1913 and got married. And my father and mother brought me back with my sister in 1925. Well, what had happened was I got my draft card from America. And at a time when the lease and land ships was on the go, they were looking for volunteers for Navy. I wasn't going to join the Navy, so I volunteered and joined the Army in Belfast. And on a Monday morning, I had a report to the American consul, which was beside the City Hall. I had a jeep waiting on me. Took me to Alexandra Park Avenue and got sworn in. From then, they shipped me up to near Lurgan to an American hospital to get my physical. I got my physical and passed it. They sent me up to Langford Lodge and got my kit. And then back down to Alexandra Park Avenue about 4 o'clock. And when they told me to put my uniform on, and I just had all the uniform with me. I had to put the uniform and all on, and he took me into a Nissen hut. And he says, there's a spare bed, that's yours as long as you're here.
Lisnabreeny became, in 1943, late in 1943, the military cemetery where American personnel who died in various circumstances in Northern Ireland during the Second World War came to be buried. Initially, the Americans took a small plot in Belfast City Cemetery, and the first deaths of American military personnel, the remains were buried there. But towards the end of 1943, this cemetery here at Lisnabreeny was commissioned, and one of the first things that happened was that the remains in Belfast City Cemetery were disinterred and reinterred here. And of course, as the war continued, then more and more personnel came to be buried here at Lisnabreeny.
There was a small team of men to look after the cemetery, but they looked after more than the graves. Teddy Dixon again.
The grave registration guys was there, but then they were on their own. They went out away every day. At night there, one of them, Frank Miner, was the head guy. He gave me a wee lecture every night when they come home, about the army, what to do and what not to do and all this. Every night he gave me a lecture. And twice they just took me up to the graves.
These men were serving their country during a time of war. So how did they die?
Most of them was air crew. Some of them was killed, maybe the planes crashed or something. A lot of planes crashed there and they were killed there. And it was two of the accidents other ways that happened. The Navy men up in Derry, and they were actually buried first in the city cemetery. And then they lifted them up to Lisnabreeny.
Eventually 148 men were buried here. And the interesting thing is that they met their deaths in a very wide range of circumstances. Quite a number of the airmen were killed in training accidents when the aircraft that they were using crashed for one reason or another. Another aspect of the circumstances was the ferrying of large numbers of American aircraft across the Atlantic during the Second World War. And they comprised, of course, mostly bomber aircraft. But from time to time, not surprisingly, after a very long flight in very bad weather and so on, a number of them crashed both here in Northern Ireland and also in Éire, as of course it was back then. And as far as those crashes in Éire are concerned, in a number of cases the dead were brought to the border and handed over to the authorities here, and as far as the Americans were concerned, then they were brought here to Lisnabreeny and buried. And that included, interestingly enough, at least one crew that crashed in the Isle of Man, but they were not buried in the Isle of Man, they were brought here to Lisnabreeny. Other circumstances included accidents of one kind or another. One man was buried here who sadly just fell off the back of a truck. Another man blew himself up when salvaging aircraft at Langford Lodge at the air depot there. And as far as the Navy personnel were concerned, a number of them died from natural causes, as did some of the American Army personnel who were buried here. So there was a great variety of circumstances related to the nature of the presence here, most of which was really involving training activities of one kind or another.
So how important was Lisnabreeny to the Americans?
In 1948, the decision was taken to disinter all the personnel who had been buried here and repatriate the bodies either to the United States, where quite a number of them went, or in some cases they were brought to the huge American military cemetery at Cambridge in England and reinterred there. And today all that remains on this site is the beautiful little memorial to a very sad aspect of the Second World War.